If you're seeing this, something in your field is already shifting, and if you pause long enough, you might feel it not as a thought, but as a quiet pressure at the edge of your awareness, like a signal tapping gently on the inside of your chest. What if I told you that tonight, of all nights, your attention has drifted here because a very subtle alignment is trying to form? Not a cosmic event in the dramatic sense, not destiny in the theatrical sense, but a meeting point between your inner state and the zero-point field that surrounds you every moment of your life. Most people never notice that moment when the field calls for coherence. They just feel a restlessness, or a strange heaviness, or a whisper of clarity that dissolves before they can name it. But you're here, right now, and that alone tells me you're closer to alignment than you think. What if I told you the real signal never arrives with thunder? It arrives in stillness. It arrives the moment you stop trying to fix your life through sheer effort, and finally listen to the quiet intelligence beneath the noise. Tonight's alignment isn't about astrology or luck. It's about the shift that happens when your breath stops racing ahead of your life and finally settles into the rhythm that the zero-point field can respond to. You've been running loops, mental, emotional, physical, without realizing that each loop is created by a single mechanism, the state you hold before you act. The field mirrors that state. Not your wishes, not your plans, not your affirmations. And most people never discover this, because they mistake the surface of their lives for the root. But you didn't find this video by accident. You found it because somewhere inside you, a part of you is tired of repeating the same internal weather patterns. You're tired of the clouds but haven't known how to reach the sky behind them. You're tired of reacting but haven't known how to enter the observer. And maybe, for the first time in a long time, you're ready to explore a different kind of power, one that doesn't strain, or grasp, or force. A power that doesn't come from thinking harder, but from noticing more deeply. Tonight's signal isn't a message you decode with logic. It's a doorway you feel. If you get quiet for a moment, you may sense an almost imperceptible widening inside you, a gentle softening right where your breath meets your ribs. That softening is the threshold. The alignment begins not when you learn something new, but when you remember something ancient. That your awareness is the bridge between who you think you are and who you actually are beneath the turbulence. The zero-point field responds to that awareness the way still water responds to a feather dropped on its surface. It listens, it reflects, it reorganizes. So if you're seeing this, consider it a small invitation from the deeper part of your life. Tonight, before the world pulls you back into its noise, you'll be shown how to enter the quiet coherence that the field recognizes instantly. You'll be shown how to stand at the riverbank of your own mind, watching the current instead of being pulled by it. And you'll understand why aligning tonight isn't superstition or ritual, it's timing. Because sometimes the signal arrives softly, and the only question is whether you're still enough to hear it. The reason tonight matters is because up until now, your life has been running in loops that feel personal, but are actually patterned. Not because you are broken, but because your nervous system has been trained, over years, to respond to reality in a single familiar way. Think of it like a film projector that keeps loading the same reel. The images might change: new job, new relationship, new city, but the emotional storyline underneath remains eerily similar. The characters shift, the costumes change, yet the feeling in your body at the end of each chapter is often the same. Here we are again. That again is the loop, and the loop has a structure. It almost always begins with a trigger. A message left on read, a sudden expense, a tone in someone's voice, a number on a scale, a look in the mirror. The surface details differ, but each trigger activates a familiar microstorm inside you. Before you even think about it, your breath shifts, becoming a little faster, a little shallower, a little higher in the chest. Your body leans forward into time, anticipating what might go wrong. That breath pattern is like the first chord in a song the field already knows by heart. It signals, we're going into this state again. From that shifted breath, a state crystallizes. Maybe it's low-grade anxiety. Maybe it's defensiveness. Maybe it's numbness dressed up as being fine. Your muscles hold themselves the way they always do in that state, jaw set a certain way, shoulders raised a certain amount, stomach subtly tightened. This is important. The zero-point field doesn't see your labels. It responds to the total signature of your state, breath, posture, emotion, expectation as one unified broadcast. In that moment, You're standing on the riverbank, but instead of noticing the water, you've already unconsciously leaned in. Then, meaning arrives. Your mind rushes in to explain why you feel the way you feel. They don't respect me. I'm not safe. This always happens to me. I'm behind. These interpretations feel like objective truth, but they're actually stories being poured into a state that was already activated. The sky of your awareness is still intact, but thick clouds of narrative begin to gather, and because you're inside them, you mistake them for the whole sky. You are no longer just experiencing a situation. You are re-experiencing an entire timeline your body has known for years. Once meaning is set, action follows almost automatically. You send the message you always send when you feel disrespected, or you shut down the way you always do when you feel unseen. You avoid the task, overscroll, overwork, overexplain, or overeat whatever your system has practiced as its way to cope. These actions are not random. They're the behaviors that match the state your breath and body have already established. And as you act from that state, the world responds. People mirror your tension, withdraw from your defensiveness, or reinforce your fear through their own unconscious patterns. Reality hands you evidence. That evidence feels like proof. See? They really don't care. Money really is scarce. I really am alone. Things really don't work out for me. But notice the subtle sequence. Trigger. Breath shifts. State forms. Meaning attaches. Action unfolds. Evidence returns. Then the evidence becomes the new trigger. The loop closes and quietly reloads, ready to repeat. In this way, you can spend months, years, even decades living inside the same emotional weather, with different external scenery, wondering why nothing truly changes. The crisis isn't that life is punishing you. The crisis is perceptual. You've been standing in the middle of a moving river, letting the current slam into you, and calling the river reality, instead of recognizing your own position. The zero-point field, the quiet background of pure possibility, has been present in every moment. But because your attention has been locked onto the surface of events, you haven't felt its stillness. Your awareness has been identified with the clouds, not the sky, with the waves, not the ocean, with the drama, not the stage. This is why changing circumstances rarely brings lasting relief. You can switch jobs, but if your breath still tightens in the same way when someone emails you after hours, the loop reloads. You can end one relationship and start another, but if your body still braces in the same way at the first sign of conflict, the loop continues. You can start a new habit, practice a new technique, even dive into spiritual ideas. Yet if your baseline state stays unexamined, the field will keep returning the same patterns dressed in different clothes. It isn't punishing you. It's matching you. Here is the subtle pain of the reality loop. A part of you knows there is more. You've had moments outside the loop, fleeting seconds of deep presence in nature. A conversation that felt timeless, a night sky that pulled you into awe, an emergency where everything slowed and you responded with clarity you didn't know you had. In those moments, your breath dropped, your mind widened, and you touched a still center that didn't need the situation to change in order to feel grounded. That was the observer. That was you on the riverbank, even if only for a heartbeat. But because no one showed you how to stabilize that vantage point, you slipped back into the water, back into the current. Culture trained you to fix the movie instead of noticing the projector, to improve the story instead of questioning the state that keeps writing the same storyline. So you keep trying to rearrange pieces on the board, while the invisible rules of your inner game remain untouched. This is the perceptual crisis. You've been negotiating with effects instead of meeting the cause. Tonight's signal is not asking you to judge yourself for this. It's inviting you to see the mechanism clearly, with compassion, to recognize that your loops were adaptive. They formed to protect you when you didn't have better tools, and to realize that the zero-point field, this calm foundational silence underneath all movement, never stopped offering you new probabilities. It has been quietly waiting for you to step out of the automatic chain long enough to choose a different state before the next action, to become the observer before the story writes itself again. This is where alignment begins, not in forcing the river to flow differently, but in remembering you are not the river. In the next part, we'll explore what happens in that exact instant when awareness turns toward itself, and the observer effect stops being a physics term and becomes a lived doorway into a different timeline. The moment you begin to step out of the loop, something subtle but profound occurs. Your awareness shifts from being inside the movement to witnessing the movement. This is the lived form of the observer effect, not the scientific version involving particles and measurement, but the human version, where your inner state becomes the variable that shapes what unfolds next. When you observe something without collapsing into it, the probability of what comes next changes. It's not magic, it's not wishful thinking. It's the natural response of a field that mirrors your coherence rather than your confusion. And this shift is felt long before it's understood. Imagine you're standing in a room filled with floating dust motes illuminated by a single shaft of sunlight. When you wave your hand, the dust swirls, reacting to every movement you make. But when you become still, the particles begin settling into a gentle order. You don't force them, you simply stop agitating the air. Your awareness works the same way. When your breath is tight and your thoughts race, your field becomes turbulent, and the world around you tends to swirl in response. But when your breath elongates and your awareness gathers itself like a calm center of gravity, the disturbances begin to settle. You haven't controlled the dust. You've changed the air. The quantum idea is this: the field responds not to what you want, but to where you're perceiving from. The observer is not a passive watcher. The observer is a stabilizing presence. When you watch your thoughts without merging with them, a coherence begins forming in your field, a clarity, a subtle order that influences the probability landscape around you. You can feel it in micro moments. For instance, when you pause before reacting, and suddenly the situation seems to open in a way it hadn't before. Or when you soften a single breath and notice a different option appear in your mind, one that wasn't available in the reactive state. These are signs that your inner field has shifted and reality is adjusting in response. Think of the zero-point field as a vast, quiet ocean underlying every wave of experience. Most people live at the surface, tossed around by winds, weather, and tides. But beneath the turbulence lies a deep stillness. When you settle your awareness, even for a moment, you access that deeper layer, not by diving into it forcefully, but by allowing the waves to pass without losing your center. From that depth, your perception changes. You stop seeing events as fixed realities and begin sensing them as fluid potentials, movements of energy that haven't yet solidified into outcomes. This shift is emotional as much as it is perceptual. When you inhabit the observer, you stop assuming your first feeling is the truth. You begin sensing the gap between what you feel and who you are. Anxiety becomes a cloud passing across the sky of your awareness rather than the sky itself. Anger becomes a wave rather than an identity. Confusion becomes a fog rather than a verdict. And in that spaciousness, another emotion emerges, one that feels strangely familiar, as though you've always known it but rarely inhabited it. Quiet confidence. This confidence doesn't come from believing everything will go your way. It comes from recognizing that you can meet whatever arises without collapsing into it. When you remain the observer, you become larger than the situation, and the field responds to that largeness. It reorganizes around your steadiness the way water reorganizes around a stone dropped into its center. You don't need to know how it reorganizes. You only need to sense that your state is the organizing principle. You've already experienced this many times without naming it. Think of a moment when someone walked into a room with a calm presence that seemed to settle everyone else. They didn't say anything magical. They didn't fix anything. They simply carried a coherence that the room naturally attuned to. That is the human version of quantum influence. Their presence altered the probability field, shifting the tone of conversations, the choices people made, the energy in the air. We often attribute this to charisma or wisdom, but at its core, it is state transmission, the observer stabilizing the field. Now imagine directing that same quality inward toward your own experience. Instead of trying to wrestle your thoughts into submission, you watch them with the clarity of someone sitting on a riverbank observing water flow. Instead of trying to force emotions to change, you allow them to arise and release, without identifying with them. Instead of getting lost in the storyline, you soften your breath and widen your awareness, feeling the space around the story. In these moments, you shift from being an actor trapped inside a script to being the director who can choose a different scene. This is the essence of the quantum metaphor. Your inner state is not just a reaction, it is a signal. When the signal is coherent, the field reflects coherence. When the signal is fragmented, The field mirrors fragmentation. You feel this not as a theory but as a lived sensation in your chest, your breath, your posture, a softening that feels like truth, a stillness that feels like remembering, a quiet certainty that you can step out of the old loop, not by fighting it, but by observing it with enough presence that it loses its momentum. The observer effect in your life is not about controlling outcomes. It's about returning to the vantage point where outcomes can shift naturally, where possibilities that were previously collapsed, hidden beneath layers of stress, fear, and reactivity begin to reopen. When you breathe from this place, when you inhabit the stillness within the zero-point field, you send a message without words. I'm available for a different timeline now. And the field listens. In the next part, we'll explore how ancient traditions understood this shift long before the language of quantum physics existed, and how their metaphors can guide you into a deeper, more stable alignment with the quiet intelligence of the field. Long before anyone spoke of particles or fields, ancient traditions understood the quiet mechanics of awareness. They didn't use the language of photons, probability, or zero-point energy, but they described the same inner shift through symbols, doorways, thresholds, sky and clouds, breath and spirit. These metaphors were not poetic decoration, they were instructions for navigating consciousness. And as you step deeper into alignment tonight, these ancient teachings serve as bridges, guiding you toward the same stillness the quantum metaphor points to. Consider the teachings of ancient Egypt, where initiates were trained to recognize two dimensions of their own awareness: the everyday self that reacts to the world, and the deeper presence that watches from underneath. They called this deeper presence the Ba, the winged aspect of the soul capable of perceiving from expansive vantage points. The Ba wasn't something to reach for, it was something to return to. In temple inscriptions, the Ba is shown standing at the threshold of a doorway, a symbol of the moment where awareness steps back from identification and becomes the observer. Each doorway you passed through represented a shift in perception, a reminder that the state you carry determines what world you walk into. In one initiation text, the doorway is described as the place where the sun pauses before rising, a moment of stillness between worlds. This pause mirrors the quantum gap between breaths. It is neither the inhale nor the exhale, but the silent threshold where a different reality can be encoded. Egyptian mystics understood that transformation happens not through effort but through entering this inner doorway with presence. They taught that clarity arises not by chasing light but by becoming still enough that light reveals itself. Meanwhile, in the Buddhist teachings of Anapanasati, the mindfulness of breathing, the same principle appears with different imagery. Here, the breath is the bridge connecting the seen and the unseen, the body and the mind. Practitioners are instructed to observe the breath the way one watches clouds drift across the sky. Without grasping, without resisting, without identifying, the sky represents awareness itself, vast, unchanged, spacious, while the clouds are thoughts, emotions, and sensations that come and go. This metaphor is not meant to create distance from life. It is meant to anchor you in the part of you that does not fluctuate with every storm. Notice the symmetry. Egyptians used the doorway, Buddhists used the sky. Both point to the same reality. There is a you that exists beneath the turbulence. There is a space inside you that does not collapse when emotions surge or thoughts swirl. And when you inhabit that space, the field responds differently. Your perception shifts from the foreground, the clouds, the drama, to the background, the sky. And in that shift, the probabilities of what can unfold next reorganize. Kabbalistic teachings offer yet another bridge, through the image of the tree of life. Each sphere, or sephira, represents a different dimension of consciousness, from grounded physical experience to expansive spiritual awareness. But the trunk, the central pillar, is where coherence forms. It is the path of balance, the movement from reaction to alignment. Mystics described it as the river of stillness running through the center of the self, where divine breath, neshama, flows like an invisible current. This breath isn't merely physical air, it's the animating awareness that perceives without judgment. When one rests in this breath, they stand at the center of the tree, no longer swayed by the extremes of fear or desire. This is the observer in symbolic form. Different traditions, different metaphors, same principle. The shift from identification to witnessing is the key to alignment. It is the moment you step out of the loop and into the stillness where the zero-point field becomes accessible not as an idea, but as a felt presence. And it always begins in the same place. The threshold inside your breath. Imagine this threshold now. Between your inhale and exhale is a doorway. In that doorway is a sky. In that sky is a tree whose roots reach into the body and whose branches stretch toward the infinite. These images aren't meant to be mystical for the sake of mysticism. They are mirrors showing you your own architecture. You are the doorway, the sky, the tree. You are the space that allows thoughts to pass, feelings to arise, and reality to reorganize. When ancient Egyptians stepped into their temples, they walked through corridors designed to slow the breath, quiet the mind, and draw attention inward. This was not religion, it was training in coherence. When Buddhist practitioners sat beneath the Bodhi tree, they weren't seeking enlightenment as a distant goal, they were learning how to sit in the sky of their own awareness without collapsing into the passing weather. When Kabbalists traced the central pillar of the tree of life, they were practicing the art of remaining centered while life flowed around them. All of these practices point to a single truth. Alignment is not a peak experience. It is a position of awareness, a way of standing in yourself that the field recognizes instantly, a way of breathing that turns the noise of the mind into a distant echo, allowing the deeper intelligence, what Egyptians called ma'at, the principle of truth and balance, to rise to the surface. When you breathe tonight, you aren't performing a technique. You are stepping into a lineage of humans who learned to meet the world not from the turbulence of the surface but from the stillness beneath it. And as you enter that stillness, you begin to feel the same doorway the ancients felt, a quiet space where everything inside you begins to reorganize, and the field listens. In the next part, we'll move from metaphor to direct experience, guiding you into a precise, gentle, repeatable practice that lets you step through this doorway with intention. Now that you've walked through the doorway of metaphor, it's time to feel the shift directly, not as philosophy, not as imagery, but as a lived sensation in your own body. Tonight's alignment only becomes real when your awareness meets your breath in a very specific way. Think of this part not as a ritual, but as a quiet laboratory, where you observe yourself with the same gentleness the ancients brought to their temples. Before we begin, remember, this is educational, contemplative exploration, not a substitute for medical guidance. Everything we do here is soft, safe, slow, and within your natural range. Start by sitting however your body feels most supported. You don't need a special posture, just enough steadiness that your breath can move without effort. Let your shoulders drop slightly. Let your jaw loosen. Let your hands rest where they naturally fall. And before you try to change anything, simply notice. Notice the way your breath is moving right now, without polishing it, without adjusting it, without making it spiritual. You're meeting yourself exactly where you are. This first noticing is more important than anything you'll do next. It's the moment the observer steps onto the riverbank. You might sense your inhale is a little shallow. You might notice your exhale trails off quickly. Or maybe your breath is already soft and low. There's no right version, only the honest one. As you notice, imagine the ancient Egyptian initiate stepping into their inner doorway, or the Buddhist practitioner sitting beneath the sky of their awareness. You're entering the same quiet threshold. Now we begin the practice I call oval breathing. A gentle, coherence-forming pattern that mirrors the movement of a smooth, unbroken shape. You're not inhaling up or exhaling down. Instead, imagine your breath traveling in an oval, rising along the back of your body as you inhale, and descending along the front of your body as you exhale. The shape isn't literal, it's a felt sense of continuity, a loop that has no sharp corners and no abrupt edges. This oval creates a subtle signal the field recognizes immediately: continuity instead of contraction. Try one gentle inhale and imagine that rising movement. It doesn't need to be deep, just smoother than usual. Then exhale with a sense of descending, soft, released, unforced. If it doesn't feel vivid yet, that's okay. The body learns through repetition, not strain. Let's take another cycle, slow enough that you can sense the shift inside your chest. Inhale, rise, exhale, descend. You might feel a slight widening near the ribs, or a softening in the throat, or a new ease behind the eyes. These micro-changes are the body's way of acknowledging the observer. Now, notice the space between breaths, the quantum gap the Egyptians spoke of as the silence of Ra. Don't hold your breath. Don't lengthen it. Just be aware of the moment when the inhale completes itself but the exhale hasn't begun. That tiny pause is a doorway. It's the place where meaning stops clinging to you, where the loop loses momentum. And in that pause, simply notice. Here I am, not as thought, but as presence. Then let the exhale come naturally. If you feel even a slight stillness in that gap, you've already stepped into the 0-point alignment. It's subtle, like dipping a toe into warm water. No fireworks, no visions, no performance. Just a shift in the density of your awareness, a softening of the edges, a little more spaciousness around your thoughts. Now we bring attention into your body, the way the ancient temple architects guided initiates through inner chambers. Start at the chest, the heart chamber. As you inhale, sense any tightness or holding without trying to fix it. Just witness it. The observer never forces. With each exhale, imagine the breath gently brushing the tension like wind across sand. You're not dissolving the tension. You're creating space around it. And space is what transforms. Move awareness down to your belly, the intuition chamber. Place a hand there if it helps. Notice whether the breath reaches this area. Many people live their entire lives breathing only into the top half of their body. If your breath feels shy, meet it with kindness. Think of this area as a room that hasn't been visited in a while. With each oval breath, you're opening the door a little wider. Now bring awareness to your throat, the expression chamber. Simply notice whether it feels open, or narrow, or guarded. Most of us carry unsaid sentences here. You don't need to speak them. Just let them be witnessed. A witnessed truth begins dissolving on its own. At this point, your field is already shifting. The 0-point field responds to coherence the way a tuning fork responds to its matching frequency. You're not controlling anything. You're aligning with the part of you that is naturally coherent when you stop interfering. To carry this practice into daily life, I'll give you 3 micro-protocols, gentle awareness cues you can apply without anyone noticing. Micro-protocol 1. The 1. Breath reset. Before answering a message or reacting to a trigger, take one oval breath and notice the gap. This single breath shifts your entire probability field. Micro-protocol 2. The hand to chest anchor. Place your hand on your chest for 2 seconds and soften your exhale. This signals safety to your system and coherence to the field. Micro-protocol 3. The sky glance. Whenever you feel overwhelmed, look slightly upward, not straining, just enough to remind your mind of the sky beyond clouds metaphor. This interrupts identification instantly. With these tools, you're not escaping your life. You're re-entering it from the observer. And in the next part, you'll see how this shift becomes the turning point where you stop repeating old loops and begin creating new timelines with clarity, compassion, and grounded power. There comes a moment in every inner journey when something subtle clicks, not as an epiphany exploding in your mind, but as a deeper settling in the space behind your breath. A moment when you realize the loop isn't some cosmic punishment, and you're not trapped in fate's machinery. The moment is quiet, almost delicate, like noticing that the river you've been fighting has a riverbank you can step onto at any time. This is the turning point, the shift from victim to creator. Not because you dominate reality, but because you finally understand where reality begins inside the state you choose before the world answers back. Up until now, your actions have mostly been driven by unexamined states, not because you failed, but because no one ever taught you to. End. Notice the breath that precedes the story. When your breath tightens, your meaning tightens. When your breath softens, your perception softens. When your breath becomes coherent, your field becomes coherent. And coherence is the signature the 0-point field responds to. Victim consciousness is simply identification with the turbulence. Creator consciousness is identification with the sky. The clouds still move, the emotions still rise, but your center doesn't collapse. This shift isn't philosophical, it's somatic. You feel it in the way your breath lands lower, the way your shoulders unhook, the way your awareness widens just enough for you to see that every situation has more than one doorway. The 0-point field is a mirror, and stillness is what makes the mirror clear. To understand how this turning point functions in your life, we'll enter 3 everyday scenes: money, relationships, and leadership, each one showing how state precedes story, and how a single breath can redirect a timeline. Scene 1. Money from scarcity loop to stability field. Imagine you're checking your account late at night. A bill is higher than expected. You feel the familiar tightening in your stomach, the microspasm in your breath. In the past, this would send you straight into the not enough loop. You'd spiral into calculations, fear narratives, rushed decisions. But tonight, you pause. One oval breath, inhale rising, exhale descending. In the gap, you notice, this is a state, not the truth. And suddenly the situation shifts. Your mind clears enough for options to appear ones that were invisible in panic. A payment plan, a resource you forgot you had, a conversation that can be initiated calmly. The field rearranges not because the number changed, but because you changed the vantage point from which you saw it. Money begins responding to stability because stability is what you're broadcasting. Scene 2. Relationship from defensiveness to connection. Picture someone you care about saying something sharp, something that touches an old wound. Your chest contracts, your breath rises, your mind prepares for retaliation or retreat. This is the ancient loop of protection, but now you're aware of it. You place a hand gently on your chest, micro-protocol 2. You breathe one coherent oval. In that breath, the field inside you clears just enough for curiosity to enter. Instead of snapping back, you ask a simple question. Are you feeling overwhelmed? The entire energy shifts. What would have become an argument becomes a conversation, not because you forced alignment, but because you embodied it. Your presence invited coherence from them. This is the quiet power of the observer in relationships. You stop matching their turbulence and begin offering them your stillness as a reference point. Scene 3. Leadership from performance to presence. Now imagine yourself in a position where others look to you, your team, your family, your peers. There's pressure, expectations, the urge to prove yourself. In the old loop, you would push harder, talk faster, strategize from stress. But now, before responding, you look slightly upward, the sky glance, and reconnect to the metaphor of clouds and sky. You feel the breath descend into your belly. You answer from presence rather than performance. People feel the difference. Your words land more deeply. Your decisions carry clarity. You become the calming center others organize around, not through authority, but through coherence. This is leadership at the level of field, not force. Across all 3 scenes, the pattern is the same. You're no longer living from reaction. You're living from awareness. You've stopped trying to rearrange the outer reality while leaving your inner reality untouched. You've discovered the subtle truth the ancients encoded in every temple, every teaching. State is the architect. Story is the construction. When you shift the state, the story rewrites itself. This is the birth of creator consciousness, not a grand declaration, but a series of quiet choices. A choice to notice instead of collapse. A choice to breathe instead of brace. A choice to respond instead of defend. And in these choices, a new kind of agency arises. Not the brittle agency of control, but the grounded agency of alignment. You don't have to be fearless to enter this state. You don't have to be calm all the time. You don't have to fix every part of yourself first. The observer doesn't demand perfection. It only asks for presence. And with every returning breath, you strengthen the neural, emotional, and energetic pathways that allow coherence to become your default rather than your exception. This is what it means to step onto the riverbank, to feel life flow, but not drown in it, to stand in the quiet center while probabilities shift around you. In the next part, we will step even deeper into the philosophical heart of this work. What meaning, belonging, and dignity feel like when you're aligned with the 0-point field, and how stillness becomes not an escape from the world, but a gift you offer to it. As you begin to inhabit this new vantage point, the observer on the riverbank, the sky behind the clouds, the breath resting in its quiet oval, something deeper awakens. Not a technique, not a strategy, but a sense of homecoming. It's the realization that beneath all your striving, beneath your self-critiques, beneath your loops, there has always been a steady presence inside you that never left. The 0-point field isn't some distant cosmic concept. It is the stillness you touch whenever you let the noise inside you settle into silence. And when you begin to live from that stillness, life stops feeling like something you must conquer and starts feeling like something you are in conversation with. This is where the philosophical dimension emerges, not as abstract thinking, but as a felt understanding. You begin seeing that dignity isn't earned through achievement or external validation. It is inherent in the simple fact that you are aware. The very capacity to notice, to witness your thoughts, feel your breath, observe yourself from a space of clarity, means you exist in a dimension deeper than any circumstance. You are not defined by the clouds of your emotional weather, but by the sky that holds them. That sky has never been broken. It has never been inadequate. It has never been unworthy. It has only been veiled. And belonging shifts from something fragile to something intimate. You no longer chase belonging in the eyes of others, because you feel rooted in a presence that does not ask you to perform. Belonging becomes the natural consequence of being aligned with yourself. When you stand in stillness, the world recognizes you as part of its own stillness. Other people sense it not because you impress them, but because your coherence reminds them of their own. You become like a lantern in a dark room, not announcing itself, simply shining, and in that shining giving others permission to see. Meaning, too, changes texture. It stops being a puzzle you must solve or a purpose you must prove. Meaning becomes something that unfolds through your presence rather than your pressure. When you live at the surface of the mind, you constantly search for meaning, hoping it will soothe the restlessness you feel. But when you drop beneath the surface, into the quiet field of awareness, meaning begins arising naturally. It moves toward you instead of you chasing it. Small actions feel significant. Ordinary conversations carry depth. The simplest breath feels like participation in something vast and intimate at the same time. Stillness becomes less of a refuge and more of a form of public art, something you offer to the spaces you move through. When you walk into a room grounded in the observer, you influence the atmosphere the way a still pond influences the land around it. You don't have to speak about peace. You embody it. You don't have to insist on clarity. You model it. Others sense the coherence of your field and find themselves breathing differently, thinking differently, softening without knowing why. In this way, your stillness becomes communal. Your alignment becomes relational. Your presence becomes a kind of silent leadership. And yet, there is no grandiosity in this. The power doesn't come from ego, from thinking you are spiritually advanced or uniquely enlightened. In fact, the observer state dissolves grandiosity naturally, because it reveals how similar we all are. Every human being is navigating their own loops, carrying their own stories, bracing against their own storms. When you see this from the riverbank, compassion rises effortlessly. You stop expecting perfection from yourself or others. You recognize that people lash out from fear, shut down from overwhelm, and repeat patterns because they don't yet know how to step into the sky of their awareness. And instead of reacting with judgment, you respond with understanding. This is clarity without superiority, empathy without entanglement. Stillness gives you agency not by making you powerful over others, but by helping you align with the deeper intelligence inside you. You stop pushing, grasping, or asserting. You begin listening to your breath, to your body, to the field. In that listening, life opens. Decisions become simpler. Intuition grows stronger. You feel guided, not by an external voice, but by the quiet coherence that emerges when your state no longer contradicts your truth. And here is the deepest message of this entire journey. You do not need to transcend your humanity to experience this alignment. You do not need to become unfeeling or detached. You do not need to eliminate desire or silence passion. You only need to learn how to return. Return to the breath that softens instead of tightens. Return to the observer who watches rather than collapses. Return to the riverbank instead of the river. Return to the sky instead of the storm. This return is the practice. And every time you return, you strengthen the pathways that make coherence your resting place rather than your occasional refuge. You are not being asked to become someone new. You are being asked to remember the part of you that has been here all along, the still, quiet center that has never been harmed by your thoughts, never been stained by your mistakes, never been diminished by your fears. That center is your access point to the 0-point field. It is the bridge between the human you and the infinite you. When you align with it, you walk through the world carrying a natural dignity, a soft authority, and a peace that does not depend on circumstances. Before you leave this space tonight, we'll anchor the alignment you've cultivated not through force, not through intention alone, but through coherence. Think of this part not as an ending, but as a quiet imprinting. The 0-point field responds most clearly when your breath, awareness, and choice move together in a single, gentle rhythm. This ritual is simple, but its simplicity is what lets the signal carry cleanly. Sit so your body feels supported. You don't need perfect posture, just enough steadiness that your breath can land softly. Let your shoulders loosen. Let your jaw relax. Let your hands rest naturally. Now take 3 coherent breaths, slow and oval, the way you practiced earlier. First breath, inhale rising along the back of your body. Exhale descending along the front. Feel the air soften the edges inside you. Notice the gap, the tiny stillness between inhale and exhale. That is your doorway. Second breath, inhale rising, exhale descending. Imagine your field smoothing, settling, becoming clear like calm water at dawn. You are not trying to create anything. You are letting the noise fall away. You're returning to the sky behind the clouds. Third breath, inhale rising, exhale descending. In the gap, sense a quiet question forming. What quality do I choose to embody as the observer? Not a goal, not an aspiration, a state, a frequency, a word that feels like remembering. Perhaps your word is clarity, because you're ready to see without collapsing into old storms. Perhaps it's peace, because you're done negotiating with chaos. Perhaps it's courage, because your soul is tired of shrinking to fit familiar patterns. Perhaps it's compassion, because you no longer want to move through the world armored. Perhaps it's alignment, because you finally understand that alignment, not effort, is the true force in your life. Whatever word rises, take a moment to feel it not as a concept, but as a physical sensation. Let it settle into your chest the way a seed settles into warm soil. Let it spread through your breath, becoming part of the rhythm that shapes your field. Now place one hand gently on your chest. Feel the warmth, the weight, the presence of your own awareness meeting your own body. This contact isn't symbolic. It's a reminder of the ancient teachings you've walked through. The Egyptian doorway, the Buddhist sky, the Kabbalistic breath, all of them lead here to the point where awareness touches the body and coherence forms. With your hand on your chest, speak softly, either aloud or in your mind. I choose to, your word, as the observer. Feel how that sentence doesn't ask the world to change. It asks you to align. Feel how the declaration carries no force, no strain, only clarity. This is the type of signal the field responds to. Clean, steady, coherent. Now let one final exhale soften your entire system. Imagine the breath carrying your chosen word outward, not broadcasting, not demanding, simply offering it into the field the way a lantern offers light. The field listens. It always has. What changes now is that you're listening back. If this journey resonated with you, if you felt even one moment of stillness, one softening, one return, then I invite you to subscribe to this frequency, not as content consumption, but as alignment maintenance. Every time you return here, you strengthen the pathways that keep you on the riverbank of your own awareness. Take one last breath. Inhale rising, exhale descending. You are aligned. You are present. You are the observer.